The sound came from beneath the floorboards. James Hartley froze mid-step in the dim corridor of Windsor Castle. It was 3 in the morning, and he was alone. The ancient stones around him held their breath. He pressed his ear against the cold marble floor, listening. There it was again, a low scraping sound, like metal dragging against stone. In his 12 years as a royal guard, James had walked these halls thousands of times. He knew every creak, every shadow, every ordinary sound of the night. This was not ordinary. His hand moved instinctively to his radio, but something stopped him. Protocol said, "Report everything." But protocol also said these floors were solid. There was nothing beneath this corridor except foundation and earth. Yet the sound continued, rhythmic and deliberate. Coming from a place that shouldn't exist, James had been thinking about his grandmother all evening. She had worked in the palace kitchens during the war, back when Queen Elizabeth was still a young princess. Before she died last year, she had whispered something strange to him. The old queen knew secrets the walls would never tell, she had said, her weathered hand gripping his. If you ever hear the stones speak, listen carefully. At the time he thought it was just the confusion of old age. Now, kneeling on the cold floor in the darkness, those words felt different. The scraping stopped. James stood slowly, his heart beat loud in his ears. The corridor stretched ahead of him, lined with portraits of royals from centuries past. Their painted eyes seemed to watch him, knowing something he didn't. The air felt heavier somehow, thick with history and hidden things. He took another step forward. His boots made no sound on the carpet runner. The palace was a maze of rooms and passages, some used daily, others forgotten for decades. But James knew his route. East wing, 3rd floor, the Queen's former corridor. He had guarded this section more times than he could count. Then he saw it, a thin line of light, no wider than a thread, seeping up between 2 floorboards near the wall. He approached slowly, crouching down. The light was faint, yellowish like candlelight. It flickered as if someone was moving on the other side. Before you go further into this mystery, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what James discovers next. This story only gets more intense. James ran his fingers along the floorboards. They were old oak, installed during Victoria's reign, supposedly sealed permanently into place. But when he pressed down on one particular board, he felt it give slightly, not much. Just enough to know it could move. His training said to call this in immediately. His instinct said to wait. Because if there was someone down there, beneath the palace, they would hear the radio chatter. They would disappear before anyone could investigate. And James would spend the rest of his career wondering what secret he had almost uncovered. He pressed harder on the board. It shifted with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the silence. Then, slowly, a section of the floor began to lift. Not one board, but 6, moving together like a hidden door. The smell hit him first, damp earth and old stone. Then the light grew brighter, revealing narrow stone steps descending into darkness. James stared into the opening. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to call for backup, to follow procedure. But his grandmother's words echoed in his mind. The old queen knew. Secrets. He looked down the corridor one last. Time, empty, silent. Then he placed his foot on the first step and began to descend into a part of Windsor Castle that didn't exist on any official map. The walls around him were much older than the palace above. These stones had been here first, long before Windsor became a royal residence. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, something was moving. Asterisk, the steps were worn smooth in the center, proof that feet had traveled this path for generations. James counted 23 steps before reaching the bottom. The air was cooler here, carrying that particular dampness of places that never see sunlight. The tunnel stretched in both directions, carved from bedrock and lined with bricks that looked medieval. Small alcoves had been cut into the walls at regular intervals, and in each one sat an old oil lamp. Someone had lit them recently. The glass was clean, the wick still smoking slightly. James pulled his flashlight from his belt but didn't turn it on yet. The lamplight was enough, and he didn't want to announce his presence more than necessary. His hand stayed near his radio. One button press, and the entire palace security would flood these tunnels within minutes. But something held him back. Curiosity. Or maybe it was the weight of his grandmother's words. Heavy as a promise, he chose the right passage, moving quietly along the wall. His fingers traced the rough brick as he walked. Someone had carved marks into the mortar between stones. Not random scratches, but deliberate symbols. A crown. A rose. Letters to warn, to read. This tunnel had been here for centuries, hidden beneath the palace, used by people who needed to move unseen. The passage curved gently, following the natural contour of the land beneath the castle. James estimated he was walking parallel to the main palace, perhaps heading toward the old chapel. The ceiling was low enough that he had to duck occasionally, and the walls felt close, pressing in from both sides. Then he heard voices. He stopped immediately, pressing himself against the cold brick. Two people, speaking in low tones, coming from somewhere ahead. One voice was older, male, authoritative. The other was younger, female, uncertain. James crept forward, moving from shadow to shadow between the lamps. The tunnel opened into a small chamber ahead. He could see the orange glow of firelight dancing on the walls. He positioned himself at the edge of the opening, staying hidden, and listened. "The documents are all here," the older voice said. "Untouched since 1952, exactly as she left them." The younger voice asked. "If these are just historical records, they're not just records. Sarah, these letters would rewrite what the public thinks they know about the monarchy. About decisions made during the war, about compromises that kept Britain alive, but cost more than anyone admits." Out. James risked a glance around the corner. The chamber was circular, maybe 15 feet across, with a vaulted ceiling. Wooden shelves lined the walls, packed with boxes, folders, and what looked like leather-bound journals. In the center, an old wooden table held several documents spread out under a battery-powered lamp. Two people stood at the table. The man was in his 60s, wearing a suit but no tie, his gray hair neat but his face tired. The woman was younger, maybe 30, dressed in dark clothes, her blonde hair pulled back. Neither wore palace identification. "Sir Geoffrey wanted these destroyed," the man continued. "After her death, the plan was to burn everything. But a few of us remembered our oath to her, not to the crown. To her personally. She made us swear that if the time ever came, we would preserve the truth." The woman picked up one of the letters, holding it carefully. Letters to Churchill. Personal correspondence about the abdication. Plans for evacuation if the Germans invaded. "This is incredible. This should be in the archives." "It can't be," the man said firmly. "Not yet. Maybe not in our lifetimes. Some truths protect by staying buried." She understood that. She spent 70 years balancing what people needed to know with what they needed to believe. James felt his throat tighten. Queen Elizabeth. They were talking about Queen Elizabeth. And these were her hidden records, stored in secret tunnels beneath the palace she had called home for nearly a century. "How many people know about these tunnels?" the woman asked. "Fewer every year." The Queen knew. A handful of her most trusted advisors. The passages were built in the Middle Ages, expanded during the Civil War, used again during World War II. They run beneath the entire castle complex, connecting to buildings that were demolished centuries ago. Most of the entrances are sealed now. This is one of the last accessible routes. And the guard upstairs? Do they know? James tensed. The guards? The man laughed softly, but not unkindly. They walk over history every day and never suspect it's beneath their feet. It's better that way. Secrets stay secret when fewer people carry them. The woman set down the letter and picked up another. There's something here about a warning. A message she left in case someone found this place after she was gone. "Yes," the man said, his voice growing serious. She knew the tunnels wouldn't stay hidden forever. Buildings shift. Renovations happen. Eventually someone would hear something or see something. She left instructions. If the wrong person finds this place, everything gets destroyed immediately. If the right person finds it, he trailed off. The woman looked at him, waiting. "If the right person finds it," he continued slowly. They'll understand why some secrets need guardians, not graves. James felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. He thought about his grandmother again, about her cryptic message, about 12 years of loyal service to the crown. Was he the right person? Or the wrong one? His hand moved to his radio. One decision would change everything. Before he could make it, a floorboard creaked behind him. James spun around, hand flying to his sidearm. A figure stood in the tunnel, backlit by lamplight, watching him with calm, knowing eyes. "Hello, James," the figure said softly. "Your grandmother told me you would come eventually. I've been waiting for you." The woman stepped into the light, and James recognized her immediately. Margaret Foster, the Queen's former private secretary. She had retired 3 years ago after 40 years of service. Her face was older now, lined with time and secrets, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "Mrs. Foster," James whispered, lowering his hand from his weapon. His heart was still racing. "What are you doing here?" "The same thing you are," she replied, moving closer. "Following a legacy?" "Your grandmother was my friend, James. Did she ever tell you that?" He shook his head, unable to find words. Margaret smiled sadly. "We worked together during the Queen's final years. Elizabeth knew she was running out of time. She spent months deciding what to preserve and what to let go. Your grandmother helped her sort through decades of memories. They grew close. Two women who had both served the crown their entire lives, saying goodbye to an era. From the chamber behind him, the voices had stopped. The man and woman had heard them talking. Footsteps approached. "It's all right," Margaret called out. "He's the one I told you about." The older man appeared in the doorway. Up close, James recognized him too. Lord Ashford, former master of the household, one of the most senior positions in the royal staff. He had managed the daily operations of the palace for decades, before retiring right after the Queen's death. Lord Ashford studied James with tired but kind eyes. James Hartley. 12 years of exemplary service. No disciplinary actions. 3 commendations for excellence. Your grandmother spoke very highly of you. I don't understand, James said. Why did my grandmother tell you about me? What is all this? Margaret gestured back toward the chamber. Come, you deserve to see. James followed them into the circular room. The younger woman, Sarah, watched him carefully, but said nothing. The table was covered with documents that looked impossibly old and impossibly important. Letters with royal seals, maps marked with secret notations. Photographs from the war years showing the royal family in moments never seen by the public. Queen Elizabeth knew these tunnels better than anyone alive, Lord Ashford began, his voice taking on the tone of someone telling a story that needed to be told. Her father showed them to her when she was just a girl. During the Blitz, when bombs fell on London night after night, these passages were escape routes. The royal family could flee Windsor through underground networks that connected to the countryside miles away. Margaret picked up a leather journal from the shelf. But the tunnels were more than escape routes. They were archives. Places to hide things that were too dangerous to keep upstairs. Treaties that were never signed. Letters that contradicted official history. Evidence of decisions made in darkness to keep the nation alive in the light. She opened the journal. James saw handwriting he recognized from 1,000 photographs and documents. Queen Elizabeth's precise, elegant script filled the pages. She wrote this in her final year, Margaret continued. A guide to the tunnels. A catalog of what's hidden here and why. She called it her truth insurance. If the official histories ever became too sanitized, too distant from reality, someone could come down here and find the complicated, messy human truth. James felt dizzy. But why tell my grandmother about me? Why not keep this with your own people? Lord Ashford exchanged a glance with Margaret. Because we're old, James, and we're tired. Sarah here is our last recruit, and she's only here because her grandfather served with us. We need young people. People who will be alive 50 years from now when these documents can finally see daylight. People who understand what loyalty really means. Your grandmother saw something in you, Margaret added. A commitment to service without personal ambition. You never sought promotion or recognition. You just did your duty day after day, year after year. That's rare. That's the kind of character this responsibility requires. James looked around the chamber at the shelves packed with history. What exactly are you asking me to do? Guard it, Lord Ashford said simply. Not every night. Not alone. But become part of the rotation. Learn the tunnels. Understand what's down here and why it matters. And when we're gone, train the next generation. The Queen left specific instructions, Margaret said, flipping to a page in the journal. She wanted the guards to know. Not all of them. Never all of them. But select individuals, chosen carefully, invited into the truth. She believed that secrets kept only by the powerful become weapons. Secrets shared with the loyal become shields. Sarah finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. It's not just about hiding things. It's about context. My grandfather served in the war. He told me stories before he died about decisions Churchill made. Orders the king gave, compromises Princess Elizabeth witnessed as a teenager. The official history makes it all sound noble and clear. It wasn't.
Yes.
It was desperate and terrifying and often morally gray. But it saved Britain. These documents show that they show the real cost of survival. James picked up one of the letters. It was from Winston Churchill to King George VI, dated 1944. The language was urgent. The subject matter stunning. Plans to evacuate the royal family to Canada if D-Day failed. Secret negotiations with resistance movements. Preparations for a government in exile. This would change how people see the war, James said quietly. Yes, Lord Ashford agreed, which is why it stays hidden for now. People need their heroes. They need to believe their leaders were confident and certain. The truth is more complex. Leadership during crisis is terrifying and uncertain, and full of mistakes that somehow still save lives. That truth comes later, when enough time has passed that people can handle complexity. Margaret closed the journal. Her Majesty's last written entry was about you, actually. Not by name. But about the young guards who walk the halls now. She wrote that they deserve to know they're walking over history, that their service connects to something larger. She hoped one day someone like you would be brave enough or curious enough to find your way down here. James felt emotion welling up in his chest. My grandmother said the Queen knew secrets the walls would never tell. She told me to listen if the stones ever spoke. The stones are speaking now, Margaret said gently. The question is, what will you do with what they're saying? James stood in the circular chamber, surrounded by century-spanning secrets. Faced with a choice that would define the rest of his life. Above him, the palace slept, unaware. Around him, the guardians of hidden truth waited for his answer. He thought about his grandmother, about 12 years of service, about loyalty and duty, and the weight of things that must be carried in silence. He thought about Queen Elizabeth, spending 70 years balancing truth and necessity. Knowing that some secrets protected more than they harmed, then he thought about the scraping sound that had led him here. Someone else knows about the tunnels, he said suddenly. That's what I heard. Someone was moving down here before I came down. The three guardians exchanged alarmed looks. Lord Ashford moved quickly to the chamber entrance, listening. Margaret's hand went to her phone. Sarah looked frightened. Where? Lord Ashford demanded. Where exactly did you hear it? The corridor above. East wing, 3rd floor. Near the Queen's apartments? Margaret's face went pale. That's a different tunnel. One we thought was sealed. If someone has opened that entrance, a distant sound echoed through the tunnels. The scraping again, but louder now. Closer, and with it, voices. Not friendly ones. Urgent. Searching. They're looking for this place, Sarah whispered. Lord Ashford's jaw tightened. Then we have very little time. James, you need to decide right now. Are you with us or not? Because if you're not, you need to leave immediately and pretend you never saw any of this. But if you stay, you're one of us. And you're about to face your first test. The scraping sound grew louder. Someone was in the tunnels. Someone who shouldn't be. And they were getting closer to the chamber that held secrets worth killing for. Asterisk. James made his decision in the space of a heartbeat. I'm with you. What do we do? Margaret moved instantly to the shelves, pulling down what looked like an ordinary journal. She opened it, revealing a hollow interior containing a set of old iron keys. "Sarah, you know the protocol. Start moving the most sensitive documents to the deep vault." Sarah nodded and began gathering folders from the table, moving with practiced efficiency toward a dark opening in the far wall that James hadn't noticed before. Lord Ashford grabbed a battery-powered radio from a shelf. Not a palace security radio, but something older, military-grade. "James, how many entrances did you pass on your way here?" "None, just the one I came through." "Then they're using the North Passage. That entrance was supposed to be bricked up 30 years ago." Lord Ashford's expression was grim. Someone with knowledge opened it. Someone who knows what they're looking for. The voices in the tunnel grew clearer. 3 people, maybe 4. Speaking Russian. James felt his blood run cold. Foreign operatives in the palace tunnels, searching for royal secrets. This had gone from mysterious to dangerous in seconds. Margaret appeared at his side, pressing something into his hand. It was a small brass medallion on a chain, worn smooth with age. The Queen carried this for 70 years. She wanted it to go to the next guardian. "If anyone questions you, show them this. Anyone who knows what it means will help you." James looked down at the medallion. One side showed the royal cipher. The other was inscribed with Latin words he didn't understand. "Custodes Veritatis," Margaret said quietly. "Guardians of truth." It's older than the current royal family. Older than Windsor itself? For 800 years, someone has worn that medallion and protected what needs protecting. The footsteps were closer now, maybe 30 seconds away. The intruders had reached the main passage. They would see the lamplight soon. They would find the chamber. "We can't let them take anything," Lord Ashford said, his voice steel. "James, you're armed? We're not." "If this turns violent, it won't," James interrupted. He pressed his radio, changing to the emergency channel. "All units, this is Hartley. Intruder alert. East Wing basement level. Multiple suspects, possibly armed, possibly foreign nationals. I need immediate backup to my position."
It crackled.
Then the night commander's voice cut through. "Hartley, there is no basement level in the East Wing. Confirm your location?" James looked at Margaret. She nodded slightly. "Sir, I'm in maintenance tunnels beneath the East Wing. Access point is 3rd floor, Queen's Corridor, hidden panel in the floor. Be advised, the suspects are approaching my position now. I can hear them." Pause. "Then, all units converge on East Wing 3rd floor. Hartley maintain visual contact, but do not engage unless necessary. Backup arriving in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. It would have to be enough." James turned to the others. "Get everything essential into that vault. I'll try to delay them." Margaret gripped his arm. "Don't be a hero. The documents matter, but not more than your life. The Queen would say the same thing." "I know," James replied, but he was already moving toward the tunnel entrance, positioning himself where he could see anyone approaching while staying partially concealed. Sarah had vanished into the deep vault with the first load of documents. Lord Ashford was gathering more, working with surprising speed for his age. Margaret stood by the table, her hands sorting papers with decades of practiced efficiency. Then James saw them. 4 figures emerged from the shadows of the tunnel. 3 men and 1 woman, all wearing dark clothing, professional, purposeful. The lead man held what looked like a scanner, some kind of ground-penetrating device that must have helped them find the hidden passages. The woman carried a large, empty bag. The other 2 men had their hands in their jacket pockets in a way that suggested weapons. They spotted James at the same moment he saw them fully. Everyone froze. "This area is restricted," James said in his most authoritative voice. "Identify yourselves immediately." The lead man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We are historians. We have permission to study the palace archives, not these archives. And not at 3 in the morning." James's hand moved to his sidearm. "You're trespassing in a secure royal facility. I've already called for backup. You have 1 chance to leave peacefully." The woman laughed, sharp and cold. She said something in Russian to her companions. They spread out slightly, preparing to move. "We're not leaving," the lead man said, his accent now clear. "We know what's in that room behind you. Documents that change history. Proof of things your government has denied for 80 years. We didn't come all this way to be stopped by one guard." Behind James, he heard Margaret whisper urgently to Lord Ashford. Papers rustling. Boxes being moved. They needed more time. "Actually," James said, stepping fully into the tunnel and blocking the passage, "that's exactly what you came here for. To be stopped by one guard? Because I'm not moving, and neither are you. My backup will be here in 90 seconds. You can spend that time deciding whether stealing old papers is worth spending the next decade in a British prison." The second man pulled a gun from his pocket. Not quickly, not threateningly, just revealing it. A Glock 9mm, James noted automatically. Professional choice. "Or," the man said, "you can step aside and we all walk away. No one gets hurt. We take what we came for. You tell a story about being outnumbered and overpowered. Your career stays intact. Your life continues. Everyone wins." James felt sweat on his palms. His training had covered many scenarios, but not this. Not secret tunnels and foreign agents and secrets that span centuries, but he thought about his grandmother, about her trust in him, about Queen Elizabeth carrying her brass medallion for 70 years, protecting truths that needed protecting. "Not everyone wins," James said quietly. "Some things are worth more than personal safety. You wouldn't understand that. That's why you'll never get past me." The armed man raised his weapon slightly, not pointing it directly at James yet, but the threat was clear. The woman moved toward the chamber entrance on the other side of the tunnel, trying to slip past, while James was focused on the gun. James moved faster than she expected, blocking her path. Not another step. 60 seconds, the lead man said calmly, checking his watch. "Your backup is 60 seconds away. We need 45 seconds to get what we need and disappear into the tunnels." "This doesn't have to end badly. It already ended badly." Margaret's voice rang out from inside the chamber. She appeared in the doorway, empty-handed, calm. "The moment you broke the Queen's trust, the moment you thought history belonged to whoever could steal it first." The lead man's eyes narrowed. "Lady Foster, we know who you are. We know what you protect. Just give us the Churchill correspondence and the abdication files. That's all we need. The rest you can keep." "I can't give you what's already gone," Margaret replied. James glanced back quickly. The chamber behind her was empty. The shelves cleared, the table bare. Sarah and Lord Ashford were nowhere to be seen. They had moved everything in less than 2 minutes. Impossible. Unless there were procedures in place. Emergency protocols practiced over decades. The Guardians had prepared for exactly this moment. The woman lunged forward suddenly, trying to push past James into the chamber. He blocked her, but the second man grabbed his arm, pulling him off balance. The armed man stepped forward, weapon raised. Then the palace exploded with sound, boots thundering overhead, radios crackling, shouts of armed police. "Show your hands." Echoing through the tunnels, the intruders scattered instantly, disappearing back into the dark passages like shadows erased by sudden light. James didn't pursue. He stood in the tunnel entrance, breathing hard, watching them vanish into the ancient maze beneath Windsor. Within seconds, palace security flooded the area. Flashlights pierced the darkness. The Knight Commander appeared, weapon drawn, eyes wide at the sight of the hidden passages. "Hartley, what the hell is this place?" James met Margaret's eyes across the empty chamber. She gave him the smallest nod. Permission, trust. Sir James said carefully, "I think we need to wake the master of the household. This is going to require some explanation." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of questions, secured perimeters, and careful explanations. The palace went into lockdown. Every exit was sealed. Teams swept the grounds and the tunnels, searching for the intruders who had melted away like ghosts. They found nothing. No trace of the foreign operatives except for footprints in the dust and a discarded scanner near the north entrance. Professional. These people had been trained to disappear. James sat in a secure conference room as dawn broke over Windsor. His uniform was dirty from the tunnels, his hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline. Across from him sat the current master of the household, Sir Alistair Penn. A stern man in his 50s who had been woken at 4 a.m. with news that should have been impossible. "Let me understand this correctly, sir," Alistair said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "There are medieval tunnels beneath Windsor Castle, filled with classified royal documents, protected by a secret group of former staff members, and nobody thought to inform current palace security." Margaret sat beside James, calm and composed, despite the hour. "It's not that we didn't think to inform you, Sir Alistair. It's that Her Majesty specifically requested we didn't."
Ow.
She left explicit instructions. Its queen has been gone for over 2 years, which is precisely when the clock started. Lord Ashford added from the other side of the table. He looked exhausted but unbowed. She specified a 3-year waiting period before bringing in new people. Time enough for the immediate aftermath of her death to settle. Time enough to identify who could be trusted with this responsibility. Sir Alistair rubbed his temples. "And you decided to trust a guard with 12 years' service, but no security clearance for classified materials?" "His grandmother had that clearance," Margaret said quietly. "She earned it through 40 years of loyal service and absolute discretion." She recommended James specifically. "The Queen agreed before she died." James found his voice. "With respect, sir, I didn't ask for this. I heard something suspicious and investigated. That's my job. What I found, I protected. That's also my job." Sir Alistair studied him for a long moment. "You're remarkably calm for someone who held off armed intruders alone in an unauthorized secure facility." "He wasn't alone," Margaret corrected. "He had us. And he had 800 years of institutional knowledge backing his actions. The Guardians have faced threats before. This was just the first in the modern era." "The first we know about," Lord Ashford muttered. A knock at the door interrupted them. A senior intelligence officer entered, tablet in hand. "Sir, we've identified the intruders. Russian SVR, Foreign Intelligence Service. The lead operative was flagged entering Britain 3 weeks ago on a cultural visa, but we lost track of him. The others used false passports. All are now presumed to have left the country." Sir Alistair's expression darkened. "What were they after specifically?" The intelligence officer glanced at Margaret. She sighed and pulled out a small notebook from her jacket pocket. "They mentioned Churchill correspondence and abdication files. Those are among the most sensitive documents in the collection. Letters between Churchill and the King during the war, evidence of negotiations that never made it into official records, and materials related to Edward VIII's abdication that contradict the public narrative." "Public narrative?" Sir Alistair's voice was sharp. "The official story is that Edward abdicated purely for love, to marry Wallis Simpson. That's true, but incomplete. The files below contain evidence of his Nazi sympathies, his meetings with German officials, his belief that Britain should negotiate peace with Hitler. Churchill and the King managed that situation by allowing the love story to dominate. It made Edward look romantic rather than treasonous." The room fell silent. James felt the weight of that revelation. History as he knew it, shifting slightly, becoming more complicated, more human. "If Russia obtained those documents," the intelligence officer said slowly, "they could use them to undermine British-American relations. Churchill is a symbol of Allied unity. Proof that he concealed royal treason, even for good reasons, would be a propaganda victory. They could suggest that if Britain hid that truth, what other truths are being hidden?" "Which is exactly what Her Majesty feared," Lord Ashford said. "She wasn't hiding these documents to protect the monarchy's image. She was protecting Britain's international standing. Some truths become weapons when revealed at the wrong time to the wrong people." Sir Alistair stood and walked to the window. Looking out over the castle grounds as morning lights spread across the ancient stones, "This situation is impossible. I can't officially acknowledge tunnels that don't exist. I can't secure documents that aren't in any inventory. But I also can't ignore that foreign intelligence services are actively targeting us for information they somehow know exists." "There's a leak," James said. Everyone looked at him. "Someone told them about the tunnels. Someone with knowledge. The SVR doesn't just randomly search British castles, hoping to find secret passages. They knew what they were looking for, and approximately where to find it. Margaret's face went pale. "Sarah, what about her?" Lord Ashford asked. "She's only been with us for 8 months. We vetted her through her grandfather's service record, but we didn't run a full background check. We trusted family connection over verification." Lord Ashford pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. It rang and rang. No answer. He tried another number. "Same result? Where does she live?" Sir Alistair demanded. "Kensington. Small, flat. She's a graduate student at Oxford, or that's what she told us." Margaret's voice was hollow with realization. "We were so desperate for young people to carry on the work. We didn't question enough." The intelligence officer was already on his own phone, speaking rapid commands. Within seconds, a team was being dispatched to Sarah's address. But James already knew what they would find. Nothing. An empty flat. A false identity. An operative who had played her role perfectly until the moment came to act. "She spent 8 months earning your trust," James said quietly. "Learning the protocols. Mapping the tunnels. She knew where everything was stored. When the others broke in, she was helping from the inside, moving the real documents somewhere else while we were distracted." Margaret closed her eyes, pain crossing her face. The deep vault. She took them to the deep vault. Or that's what I thought. But if she was working with them, Lord Ashford was already moving toward the door. "We need to get back down there now." If she took the most sensitive materials and passed them to her handlers— "Wait," James interrupted. He pulled out the brass medallion Margaret had given him. "She never had one of these, did she? You never fully initiated her?" Margaret looked at the medallion and understanding dawned. She wasn't a true guardian. We were still testing her. She had access, but not complete access. The deepest vault requires 2 keys and a code that only full guardians know. "Then the documents might still be secure, sir," Alistair said. "But we need to verify immediately." 10 minutes later, James found himself back in the tunnels, this time with a full security escort. The lamps were still burning, but the passages felt different now, violated. The sanctity of 800 years of secrets broken by betrayal and greed. They reached the circular chamber. Margaret moved to the far wall and pressed a sequence of stones. A section of wall swung inward, revealing another passage even older than the first. The air that escaped was cold and dry, perfectly preserved. "This section dates back to William the Conqueror," Margaret explained as they descended deeper. "The original fortress that became Windsor. The royal family has hidden things here for nearly 1,000 years." The passage ended at a heavy wooden door, reinforced with iron bands. 2 keyholes. A combination dial. Margaret used one key. Lord Ashford used another. Together, they entered a code. The door opened with a sound like exhaling, releasing air that had been sealed inside. Beyond was a room carved from solid bedrock. Shelves lined every wall, floor to ceiling. Wooden boxes. Metal containers. Leather cases. All carefully labeled, cataloged, organized, and completely undisturbed. "She never made it this far," Lord Ashford breathed. "She didn't have the keys or the code. She fed her handlers false information, made them think she could access everything. But she couldn't." James walked along the shelves, reading labels. Documents from the Tudors. Papers from the English Civil War. Letters from Victoria. Churchill's war correspondence. The abdication files. All of it still here, protected by protocols established centuries ago. "The Queen was right," Margaret said softly. "She designed the system to fail safely. Even if one guardian was compromised, even if intruders breached the outer chambers, the deepest secrets stayed protected. Trust, but verify. Access, but with limits." She thought of everything. Sir Alistair stood in the doorway, looking overwhelmed. "This changes everything. These aren't just documents. This is a parallel archive of British history, unfiltered, unedited. The truth behind the legend. And it needs to stay that way," James said firmly. "Hidden, protected, until the world is ready for it. That's what she wanted. That's what we'll give her. Sir Alistair met his eyes. You're a palace guard, Hartley. You're not trained for this kind of responsibility. James touched the brass medallion around his neck. With respect, sir, I think I just was. 3 months later, James walked the third-floor corridor of Windsor Castle during his night shift. The hidden panel had been resealed, but now he knew it was there. Now he knew what lay beneath his feet with every step. The investigation into Sarah had reached dead ends in 7 countries. She had vanished completely, along with whatever minor documents she had managed to steal before James had discovered the breach. Intelligence services were still analyzing what she might have learned, and what damage she could do. But the deepest secrets remained secure. The vault beneath the vault, untouched for 1,000 years, would continue to hold its truths for another generation at least, sir. Alistair had reluctantly agreed to maintain the Guardian system. Too many people knowing about the tunnels created risk. Better to keep it small, controlled. Protected by people whose loyalty was measured in decades rather than paychecks. James had been formally inducted. 2 weeks after the incident, the ceremony was simple. Margaret, Lord Ashford, and 3 other former staff members, whose names he was told never to reveal. They met in the circular chamber at midnight. Margaret placed the brass medallion around his neck. Lord Ashford spoke words in Latin that had been spoken in that same room for 8 centuries. Custodes veritatis, we guard truth so that lies cannot take its place. We hide knowledge so that wisdom can find it when needed. We serve not power, but posterity. We are the keepers of complicated history, the guardians of nuanced legacy. The bridge between what was and what will be understood.
Out.
Then they had taken him to the deepest vault and shown him everything. Hours upon hours of British history that the official records had smoothed over or simplified or hidden completely. Not lies, just complications. The messy reality of leadership during impossible times. He saw letters where Queen Victoria struggled with depression after Albert's death. Writing about wanting to abdicate, being talked down by advisors who feared chaos. The official history said she mourned privately but remained strong. The truth was more human. He read Churchill's private doubts before D-Day, his fear that he was sending thousands of men to their deaths in a doomed operation. His public speeches radiated confidence. His private letters showed a man terrified of being wrong. He found evidence that Elizabeth herself had nearly abdicated in the 1990s after Diana's death. When public opinion turned sharply against the monarchy, she had written the speech, prepared the documents, then changed her mind, choosing duty over peace, burden over freedom. No one knew. The moment passed. She served another quarter century. Every document showed the same pattern. Public strength built on private doubt. Leadership as the art of appearing certain while feeling terrified. History as the story of humans doing their best with impossible choices. This is what she wanted you to understand, Margaret had said, watching him read. The public needs heroes. Clear narratives. Simple truths. But the Guardians need to know the real story. Because someday, when enough time has passed, when emotions have cooled and perspective has grown, the world will be ready for complicated heroes. For leaders who were human. For history that includes doubt alongside courage. James had taken his oath seriously. Once a month, he descended into the tunnels during his night shift. He walked the passages, checked the seals, made sure the lamps were maintained. Sometimes he was alone. Other times he met Margaret or Lord Ashford. And they would sit in the circular chamber and talk about the Queen, about history. About the weight of secrets. They had recruited 2 new guardians. Carefully, slowly, both were younger staff. Members who had proven themselves over decades of quiet service. No more rushing. No more trusting too quickly. Sarah had taught them that lesson brutally. Now walking his regular route. James paused at the spot where he had first heard the scraping sound. It felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been months. He pressed his hand against the floor, feeling the hidden seams. His grandmother had known. Somehow, she had seen in him something he hadn't seen in himself. The willingness to carry weight that couldn't be shared, the strength to know truth and keep it quiet, the wisdom to understand that some knowledge serves best when hidden until its time comes. His radio crackled. Hartley status check. East Wing? All clear, he replied. Continuing patrol. All clear. The simple phrase carried so much more meaning now. Above him, the palace slept. Tourists would come tomorrow, walking halls where kings and queens had walked, taking photos, buying souvenirs, believing they understood the history of this place. Below him, the real history waited in darkness, patient, protected, growing more valuable with every passing. James thought about Queen Elizabeth, carrying her brass medallion for 70 years. Visiting these tunnels in secret, adding her own documents to the collection, preserving the truth for a future she would never see. What strength that must have taken. What faith in generations yet unborn. He touched the medallion around his own neck, hidden beneath his uniform. Someday, perhaps 50 years from now, he would be the old man descending these stairs with a younger guardian. He would share the stories, pass on the responsibility. Add his own chapter to 800 years of continuous service. The thought was overwhelming and comforting in equal measure as James continued his patrol. He passed a portrait of Queen Elizabeth in her later years. The painter had captured her well. The strength in her eyes, the slight smile that suggested she knew things others didn't, the bearing of someone who had carried heavy secrets with grace for longer than most people lived. He paused and gave a small nod of respect, not to the crown, not to the institution, but to the woman who had understood that truth was complicated, that some guardians needed to stand between history and the present. Holding space for the future to grow wise enough to understand, his radio crackled again. Hartley, the East Wing looks good. Why don't you take a break? You've been on your feet for 4 hours. Copy that. Taking 15. But instead of heading to the guard station, James found himself making his way to a quiet alcove overlooking the castle grounds. Dawn was still an hour away. The sky was that deep blue that comes just before morning. Stars were fading. A new day preparing to begin. He thought about his grandmother one more time, about her quiet service, her loyalty, her wisdom in knowing who to trust with the truth. She had spent decades working in the palace kitchens, invisible to most of the world, but seeing everything, learning everything, earning the trust of a queen who shared secrets with those who proved themselves worthy. She had chosen him. She had believed in him. And so had Queen Elizabeth, in her own way. By leaving instructions that would eventually bring him into the circle of guardians, he wouldn't let them down. He would walk these halls for as many years as he was able. He would descend into the tunnels when needed. He would protect the complicated truth of history until the world was ready to receive it without using it as a weapon. Restodes Veritatis. He whispered to the darkness, "Guardians of truth." The words felt right. They felt like home. They felt like purpose. As the first light of dawn touched the towers of Windsor Castle, James Hartley, palace guard and secret keeper, resumed his patrol. To anyone watching, he was just another guard doing his job. Walking halls, checking doors, maintaining security, but beneath his feet, hidden in tunnels that didn't exist on any map, 800 years of British history waited in silence, protected, preserved, guarded, by ordinary people who understood that some truths are too important to lose and too dangerous to share. The Queen had known that balance. She had lived it every day of her reign. And now, a new generation of guardians carried on her work, walking the line between secrecy and service, between loyalty and truth. The morning shift would arrive in an hour. James would brief them on the quiet night. Nothing unusual. Everything secure. The castle sleeping peacefully. They would never know what he protected, what he had learned, what responsibility he carried, and that was exactly how it should be. Some secrets were meant to be kept, not forever, just until the right time. James smiled slightly as he walked, his hand touching the medallion beneath his uniform one more time. His grandmother would have been proud. The Queen would have approved, and somewhere in the darkness below, The stones kept their vigil, holding history close. Waiting for the future to be ready, the guard walked on. The castle stood eternal, and beneath it all, truth waited patiently for its time to emerge into the light.